Hello and thanks for joining us for Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar. The Port of Los Angeles brings more goods into the U.S. than any other port in the country, a colossal economic engine for Southern California and beyond. Yet for all the business and industry the Port of LA has brought here over the decades, the port has also brought something else. Years worth of smog and particulate matter and greenhouse gases and other toxins that threaten public health in the neighboring communities. So just how is the Port of LA trying to rewrite its controversial environmental history? You're about to find out. The Port of Los Angeles has a storied history, a history that helped build the economy of Los Angeles and helped put Southern California on the map. In the early 20th century, the city of LA and surrounding area had an unparalleled population boom never witnessed before. That coincided with the official founding of the port back in 1907, with the cities of San Pedro and Wilmington annexed to the city of LA a couple of years later, making the port an official department of the city of Los Angeles. During the early 1900s, industries of all kinds began taking root in and around the port. Businesses like fishing, canneries, oil drilling, and shipbuilding that generated tens of thousands of jobs and commerce to LA and its thriving population. However, it wasn't until the 1950s that the Port of LA really reached a metamorphic milestone in the way this iconic waterway conducted business. That's when the containerized cargo revolution modernized the port. Now, giant containers filled with goods could easily be loaded, sealed, and shipped on boats, trains, and trucks. Almost every manufactured product was and is shipped in a container. Fast forward to today.
The Port of Los Angeles is the largest container port in North America. We're responsible for about $300 billion worth of cargo each year, and we have about 40% of the containerized cargo that comes into the United States comes through this port complex. The Port of Los Angeles is responsible for 1 in 9 jobs, either directly or indirectly, in Southern California. And cargo coming through the Port of Los Angeles touches every single congressional district in the United States. So this port is a large source of revenue, and it's a great service to everyone in the United States in terms of bringing cargo into the United States.
Chris Cannon is a Chief Sustainability Officer and the Director of Environmental Management for the Port of LA, and there is a reason why the port has a CSO dedicated to the environment and things like clean air and water. Because for all the success the port has achieved over the decades and the accomplishment of creating jobs and building the economy, the port has also had its share of critics. Over the years, many environmentalists, residents, and the media were constantly sounding the alarm, warning the Port of Los Angeles was the single largest source of air pollution in Southern California, emitting smog and particulate matter, as well as other toxins that threaten public health in the neighboring communities. They said these greenhouse gases were also contributing to climate change and global warming. Well, instead of keeping with the status quo, the port realized that in order to remain an economic success, leadership there had to embrace environmental stewardship and become a good sustainability citizen, particularly because in the late 1990s, the state of California identified diesel particulate matter as a carcinogen. And during the 90s, the port was also experiencing a significant increase in cargo volume, with the diesel engine cargo ships and diesel engine freight trucks working at a frenzied pace. The port knew it had to be a good neighbor and work with the community and the environmental groups, and also the business community in a way that was green and environmentally friendly, and in a way that allowed the port to still be an economic engine, but not at the expense of its neighbors or future generations. In other words, not having an adverse environmental impact. So in the early 2000s, the Port of LA began to develop innovative environmental programs, and in 2006, port officials approved a first-of-its-kind Clean Air Action Plan.
The purpose of the Clean Air Action Plan was and remains finding ways to reduce emissions from the major sources of pollution at the port. And that includes the ships, the trains, the trucks, the cargo handling equipment, and the harbor craft, which are tugboats essentially and workboats. Each of those categories of emissions are sources of pollution in the region, and we've looked for ways to find programs to reduce emissions from each of those categories. Since 2006, we've reduced sulfur oxide pollution by 98%. We've reduced diesel particulate matter pollution by 87%. And we've reduced oxides of nitrogen by 60%.
As Cannon points out, the port is trying to lead the way as a good sustainability citizen, and officials there must keep striving for ways to find new solutions to keep our air and water as clean as possible.
We work closely with ports around the world to try to implement environmental programs. Our Clean Air Action Plan and some of the programs that we've developed from it are first of their kind. But it doesn't mean that we don't learn things from other ports and we don't find other ways to reduce emissions even from our partner ports around the world. We have to keep looking for ways to continue to reduce pollution, and now we face maybe the worst environmental crisis the world has seen, and that's climate change. Climate change is no joke, and the Port of Los Angeles has got to do its part, as does everyone on planet Earth, to begin to reduce our carbon footprint and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we've set targets for ourselves to have zero emissions operations at our terminals and zero emissions drayage truck operations by 2030 and 2035 respectively. And this is important because trucks are one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in our emissions inventory. And cargo handling equipment is a significant source as well. So these are two areas that we must work to reduce, but we can't stop even there.
Cannon gives us a tour of the harbor and explains some of the ways the Port of LA is working to reduce emissions, some of which begin with the inventive Shore to Store project. This is a project basically trying to use zero emissions to get cargo from a ship at the port to a distribution center and then eventually to a store near you.
You can get zero emissions all the way from a ship to a distribution center and eventually to a storefront. And we call that a shore-to-store project. You've got the ship-to-shore cranes, which are electric. You've got the yard tractors, which are electric. You've got the top handlers, which are electric. And then they will load them onto trucks, which are fuel cell electric. Hydrogen fuel cell trucks that are developed by Toyota and Kenworth. And then they would take the cargo to a distribution center where it would once again be handled by electric equipment and eventually loaded either back onto electric trucks or prepared for distribution centers.
The Shore to Store project cost just over $80 million. The program was funded in part with a $42 million grant from the California Air Resources Board. Lisa Wonder joined us on our harbor tour of the Port of LA. Wonder is a marine environmental manager with the Environmental Management Division at the port. She works with Chris Cannon to help find solutions so the port can reduce their pollution.
In 2004, the first container ship in the world plugged in to shore power here at the Port of Los Angeles. Since then, we've added additional shore power berths in and around the Port of Los Angeles. We currently have 24 berths, which is more berths equipped with shore power than any other port in the world. Our early actions in the early 2000s led the California Air Resources Board to determine the feasibility of this technology. And as a result, in 2014, the California Air Resources Board promulgated a state of California law which requires now that 80% of all container and cruise ships plug into shore power while they're at berth. This significantly reduces emissions of diesel particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, and also greenhouse gases. It takes approximately 3 to 4 days for one of these container ships to unload, and when it's plugged into shore power, it reduces emissions by approximately 12 tons of carbon dioxide while at berth.
As Wonder explains, when just one ship plugs in per day, this process eliminates the equivalent of that 12 metric tons of carbon dioxide from being emitted into the atmosphere. This amount of CO2 is normally emitted into the air if the ship is running on its auxiliary engines while docked in the port, say for example, while cargo is being unloaded for several days. Back at the terminal, Wonder explains some of the other measures the port is taking to help preserve the environment.
As part of a demonstration project, Everport is demonstrating these electric yard tractors that you see behind me. They're manufactured by BYD. There are zero emissions, run on electricity, and charged by these chargers right here. The zero emission yard tractors have greatly reduced greenhouse gas emissions and also reduced pollutants.
Some of the pollutants Wonder is referring to are contaminants such as NOx, known as oxides of nitrogen, and SOx, known as oxides of sulfur, and certainly the reduction of diesel particulate matter.
Similar to charging an electric car, the Taylor top handlers also charge overnight via a plug-in battery. This one's a little bit bigger since the battery of a Taylor top pick is 1 megawatt.
So there are actually
Two portals that need to be connected for the top handler to fully charge. On a fully charged battery, the top handler is expected and currently being demonstrated for an expectation of up to 18 hours of use. Under this demonstration project, each of these top handlers is equipped with a data logger, which is capturing energy usage and other parameters over the 1-year demonstration period.
While the Port of LA still emits pollution and smog, the environmentally friendly approach that Chris Cannon, Lisa Wonder, and their sustainability team is taking is gradually advancing the port's ambitious goal of eventually being a zero emissions port. Being a sustainability change agent is a difficult task. Ask any environmentalist or port employee. And as officials there take responsibility for environmental stewardship, their moniker as America's Port could ultimately be well deserved where the environment is concerned. Joining me now to discuss this further is Jean Soroka. Jean Soroka is the Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles. And I should point out, some months ago, LA Mayor Eric Garcetti named Jean as Chief Logistics Officer for the City of LA. Jean has been tasked with leading the Logistics Victory Los Angeles campaign. Simply put, this is an effort to help get critical healthcare and emergency supplies to our area, especially during this coronavirus pandemic. So we're going to be talking all about that as well. Thanks for being here, Jean. And of course, we have a lot to talk about, don't we?
Yes, we do. Good to see you, David.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, for those who don't know, possibly don't live near the port or even here in SoCal, really describe the enormity of the port, because it's sort of like a city unto itself.
It really is. And with 7,500 acres and 43 miles of waterway, there's just so much to see here in our San Pedro, Wilmington, and Harbor City Harbor Gateway communities. Today, we have 27 terminals and 270 berths, and we've been in business now for more than 114 years.
And it really has evolved over those 114 years, hasn't it?
Oh, this engineering marvel that you see today started with the vision of Phineas Banding so long ago, talking about how this Southern California area could be a trade gateway. And it was a toss-up between Santa Monica and San Pedro for this great port complex, and weren't we lucky? Today, we're known as America's Port, with a vision to be a global model for security, sustainability, and social responsibility. Even more so, we're the largest container port in the Western Hemisphere, and known for this moniker because of the traffic that moves through this port, the jobs it creates, and the reach that it has to all of us consumers throughout the country. We have more than 100 trains a day and moved more than 9.3 million container units. We call them 20-foot equivalent units to set the record once again. And we've been the #1 port in the country for 21 consecutive years.
That is a city, as I said. Now, getting back to the field report, Jean, that we began the program with, we did just hear from your colleagues, Chris Cannon and Lisa Wonder, about some of the environmental measures you folks are working on out of the port. Could you talk some more about these efforts, because there is so much going on there related specifically to the environment and, as you had just mentioned, sustainability?
Well before my time, David, the group here, harbor commissioners, mayor, and really led by the community, tried to create an effort where we could reduce emissions and still do great business. And weren't they right? Since 2005 and 6, when the world's first Clean Air Action Plan was put into place, we have reduced emissions across the board while still growing cargo here at the Port of LA. And just to give you a flavor, we've reduced sulfur oxide by 98%, diesel particulate matter, the exhaust that comes out of the tailpipe on trucks by 87%, and nitrogen oxide, that smog-forming pollution, by 60%. And we believe there's so much more work to do in this area, but what a great start over the last decade and a half. The Clean Air Action Plan has ambitious goals or moonshots, but we're going to try to get to a zero emissions port complex by the year 2035 and have only zero emissions heavy duty trucks to haul all of our containers by the year 2035. So it's going to be very interesting. We're currently a really good test bed for private sector companies. We're testing right now 16 different demonstration projects of cleaner equipment. 90 zero emissions trucks are under that protocol. So the work that's being done here is just really tremendous. And as Chris and Lisa mentioned, the early success of what we're seeing as the first electric top handlers in the world over at Everport Container Terminal really exemplify the efforts that we're making here that no port in the world can claim except us at the Port of Los Angeles.
And anyone who knows me or knows my reporting, and particularly on this program, Gene, I do tell it like it is. And I am going to give you a shout out because it is amazing what you're doing. There is no question. I've been out there. It's pretty amazing. However, to be fair, I must say that you still have a lot of critics, particularly angry environmentalists, angry residents in your neighborhood, and certainly the media. They say you're not doing nearly enough to clean the air around the port and the water. Now, there are also those, I guess we should term them air monitoring stations. I know they measure kind of pollution and particulate matter in the air all over the port. I have read where often these monitors are registering a lot of pollution being emitted from the port. So just to be fair, how do you answer that criticism given all you are doing?
I'm with you, and we want to do more. I've lived in port cities all my life, and there is nothing I would like to see more than a zero emissions port complex. Even in the Los Angeles basin area that has the heaviest pollution of any metropolitan area in our country. So we know we have a role to play. We take that responsibility willingly. We have a very astute community here, and our ecosystem brings to us talent from all sectors of science and transportation and air quality, plus advocacy. So we're with everybody. We want to do more. We've got to advance technology faster. It must become more affordable. And that's why I've taken a very different approach. I want to bring all these people together, not just set regulation, but we're going to be holding workshops and summits with the original equipment manufacturers, the people who will buy that equipment in those heavy-duty trucks. We need policymakers and legislators to get us into a competitive state. At the same time, we've lost 20% of our market share since we began this discussion in 2002 about how we can better balance this high wire act of creating jobs, economic value drive, and our environmental stewardship. Here in California, it's in our DNA, but that balancing act is what is so difficult to bring forward. But having folks at the table that can show you what's important, show what's needed, and get to the ground truth is really where I'd like to approach. And I want our public to push us. I want our board, our mayor, our councilmen and women that sit and govern us, as well as the county and state leaders. But also, as a veteran of 32 years in this industry, I worked overseas for 11 in Asia and the Middle East, and I've been on the ground doing business in 50 countries. I can attest to you there is no other port complex in the world doing what we're doing, but we still want more.
It's interesting because anyone who has been to the port or has lived in this area for decades knows there's still a lot of pollution out there. However, you cannot discount all the efforts you are taking. Do you sometimes believe the Port of LA gets a bad rap or an unfair rap? Are you disappointed with some of what people are telling you as the high volume of pollution that's out there, or you're not doing enough?
No, I can't say we get a bad rap, and I can't blame anybody that wants to make this a better place to live and work. What I will tell you is you got folks with a lot of good ideas that want to be heard, and that's part of our makeup too. So we're going to keep pushing forward. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do, and it started well before I came here to the port. We got some great legacy and some institutional knowledge that is almost irreplaceable here. But let's keep moving forward, and if folks want to challenge us, I think that's great.
Speaking of the legacy, it's interesting. I can remember as a kid, let's say 70s and 80s. I don't want to say how old I am. The sky around the port, it was black soot. I mean, you couldn't see anything, and I know you know that. What was the catalyst? What was the event that had you folks at the port saying, wow, this is bad. We need to take personal responsibility. We have to do something. We are going to do something.
There were discussions dating back years and years, and you can hear from folks like Mike DiBernardo and Tony Gioiello, folks who grew up here that would regularly be sent home from school because it was a bad air day. They'll tell you they couldn't even see the mountains from this port enclave when they were young kids and going through school. But today you can, and you have better opportunities. I think realistically, a couple of things. Mayor Hahn wanted to talk about no new net zero concept. Move more cargo, but don't raise the emissions levels. Then suddenly, on the face of developing a new marine terminal for China shipping, a lot of folks in the community said, hey, if you're going to build even more space for cargo, we need to be more aggressive on the environmental side. And I think that was one of the real fulcrums, a jumping off point that got us into the movement of this Clean Air Action Plan, Clean Truck Program. And in this particular area, when I came to the port, we had met or exceeded all of our commitments in the first Clean Air Action Plan, some 6 years ahead of when they were promised to be delivered to this community. So in September of 2015, I called on the public to renew the Clean Air Action Plan and bring us a second chapter of both that and the Clean Truck Program. Because we had done it, we needed to raise the bar, the technology was coming, and we wanted to be at the forefront.
Gene, you mentioned international trade, China earlier. We have to talk about this controversial subject. I mean, the trade imbalance, it's almost a joke. It seems to me we bring in so much more cargo from China than we export to them. I mean, I've reported on several stories. I've been out there to the port. It's almost comical. There are acres of cargo, Gene, from China, Korea. You see these crates saying China Airlines, Hanjin Shipping, whatever, from these countries. Where are all the cargo containers of our goods in China and Korea? I mean, that imbalance is insane.
Well, it is, and it's a topic of discussion for those who have lived and breathed in our industry. Dating back to when you and I were young kids, we started to see more and more outsourcing of manufacturing because our parents didn't want to spend the money on goods at the stores. And we're pretty much the same way today. We want a deal at the retail level. We want to be able to buy online and have the next day delivery. And unfortunately, we don't have the economic structure to be able to do that here in the US. But the ability for global trade to expand, create jobs in other areas, has been a real unique opportunity, not only to get those developing nations to improve their economic offering and opportunity for their citizenry, but it's given us a chance to have a little bit different look at what that trade's going to mean for us and our jobs population. Today, we're about 3 imports for every export. And what this particular economic and health crisis has shown is that we all need to chip in to see if we can find a way to help the American economy reemerge. And that's why I've done 2 things. I've put together a group of West Coast business interests to answer the question of port competitiveness, how we can drive more cargo through our facilities and create more jobs while being that good environmental steward that we must be. Second, I believe that by focusing on exports, we can drive better value for the American farmer, the manufacturing sector broadly, our automotive manufacturers, and tiered suppliers. And if I'm right, and we can bring more export cargo through this port, we can help better balance the trade that moves through this gateway. And for the logistics decision maker, we may make a better offering, price, service, and certainty for those folks as well. So there's a strong play here, and I do think, as you correctly say, it's a great wake-up call to focus on the American exporter. On that segment, the Department of Labor in Washington states that export jobs pay 17% more than jobs in other segments. So all of this seems to be converging, even in a time of crisis where I think we can add some value.
Gene, in closing, I mentioned earlier, some months ago, Mayor Garcetti named you as Chief Logistics Officer for the City of Los Angeles. Exactly what does that mean? What are you folks doing over there?
The idea was to get the personal protective equipment to our frontline hospitals and medical workers as quickly as possible. We had all seen and witnessed the stories on the news where hospitals were sending out staff to go to grocery stores and buy hefty bags, cut the arms out because they could not get specific products for their doctors, nurses, and technicians. So the mayor thought, with our background in logistics and supply chain, having many deep relationships with customers here at the port and the great LAX airport, that the City of Los Angeles could add some value. So speeding those products to market using information technology was one aspect. Working with manufacturers or customers of the port to try to drive those direct relationships was another one we wanted to try to capitalize on. And then thirdly, working with people like the California Manufacturing and Technology Association to see what California companies wanted to convert their manufacturing facilities and get into the PPE marketplace. Well, the mayor had lofty goals, but he sure did have a lot of confidence in us. And today, Love LA now has more than 24 volunteers, mostly port workers. We've sifted through over 1,100 leads trying to find people who need product and those who want to supply it. And we just crossed the 1 million unit mark in passing out PPE at cost with no markup and no margin to more than 30 hospitals in and around the Los Angeles area. All of that was really started by our relationship with the iconic American company, the Honeywell Corporation, where we signed a 24-month contract for 24 million N95 masks at a price point of 79 cents. And while others were looking to far-reaching markets with unproven partners, middlemen and women were selling these masks for $5 a unit, we found that relationships really do count. And the leadership of Mayor Garcetti was really, really appropriate at that time to get us to drive. And now we've got much more opportunity ahead of us. There still is a lot of work, but creating an LA stockpile, being able to assist our hospitals, fill holes and plug gaps. We're never going to be their sole source of manufactured product, but I sure do think that the City of Los Angeles, with its great buying power, and the folks at the General Services Department, like Tony Royster and Melissa Usalon, John Travagota, who are professional buyers in their own right, have added so much value that we're going to keep going to help those hospitals and medical workers.
We are a great city. We do great things. Thank you so much, Gene Soroka, Executive Director of the Port of LA, for being here for what is certainly a very comprehensive interview. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, David. Good to see you, and stay well.
Thank you. And for more information about our program, just click on klcs.org and then click Contact Us to send us your questions and comments or story ideas so we can hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar.